I wasn't the kind of guy who let strangers into my life, especially not strangers with secrets. But when I saw her, standing in the freezing cold with her daughter, wrapped in thin coats that did nothing to shield them from the biting wind, something in me hesitated. I should have walked away. Instead, I stepped forward. "You can stay in my garage," I found myself saying. "Just for the night?" Her eyes flickered with suspicion. "Why?" I shrugged. "Because I can." She studied me, as if waiting for some hidden condition. When she didn't find one, she nodded. "All right." I led them inside, half expecting to regret this decision. I had no idea just how much this one choice would change everything. The next morning, I checked the security cameras. The mother was hunched over a notebook, writing furiously. Her daughter sat beside her, whispering something. Curiosity got the better of me. I knocked. No answer. Frowning, I opened the garage door and froze. The moment the mother saw me, she slammed the notebook shut and pulled her daughter closer. I narrowed my eyes. "What are you hiding?" She hesitated, gripping the book. "Nothing." But I saw the fear in her eyes. And I knew this woman wasn't just running from poverty. She was running from something far worse. "If you're in trouble, tell me now," I said, folding my arms. Her grip on the notebook tightened. "We'll leave today." Her voice was firm, final, but something told me letting them leave would be a mistake. And I was right. That night, a black car pulled up outside my house. A man stepped out, glancing at my property like he was looking for something or someone. I didn't like the way he looked, and I really didn't like the way he smiled when his eyes landed on the garage. I knocked on the garage door. Hard. The mother opened it, her face pale. "What is it?" "There's someone outside." Her breath hitched. She pulled her daughter behind her. "Is he wearing a gray coat?" I frowned. "Yeah." She grabbed my arm, her fingers ice cold. "Don't let him see us." Before I could ask why, she shut off the light and crouched beside her daughter, holding her close. I stared. Whoever this man was, she was terrified of him, and that meant he wasn't going anywhere. I stepped outside, closing the garage behind me. The man smiled. "Nice place." I didn't smile back. "Can I help you?" He slipped a hand into his pocket, pulling out a photo. My stomach tightened. It was her, the woman in my garage. "You seen her?" he asked casually. I kept my face unreadable. "Never." His smile didn't waver, but something in his eyes changed. "Let me know if you do," he murmured before turning back to his car. I watched him drive away, my pulse pounding. Whatever she was running from, it had just found her. The moment I stepped back into the garage, the mother was already packing her things. I grabbed her wrist. "Talk." She hesitated. Then, finally, she whispered, "My name isn't Maya. It's Elena." "And that man?" "He's looking for me, because I know something I shouldn't." I folded my arms. "Which is?" She handed me the notebook. I flipped through the pages, my stomach twisting as I realized what I was looking at. Records, transactions, names, and at the very bottom, one name stood out, a name I knew, and suddenly I understood why she was running. "I used to work for him," Elena admitted. "I found out what he was doing, and when I tried to leave," she swallowed hard. "He made sure I had nowhere to go." Her words sent a chill down my spine, because the man in her notebook wasn't just anyone. He was someone powerful, someone untouchable. And now, because I had let her in, I was in the crosshairs too. That night, I barely slept. And then, glass shattered. I bolted upright, adrenaline kicking in. I ran to the garage. The door was wide open. And Elena? Gone. I checked the security footage. A black car. A struggle. They had taken her. I didn't think. I just acted. Jumping into my car, I hit the gas. I wasn't letting them take her without a fight. I found them in an abandoned parking lot. Elena stood between two men, her hands shaking. The man from before smirked. "You should have stayed out of this." I clenched my fists. "Let her go." He chuckled. "Not happening." Then he pulled something from his coat. And suddenly I knew this wasn't ending without a fight. Elena clutched her daughter tightly, her hands shaking as we sat in the car, catching our breath. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as I glanced at the rearview mirror. Headlights. A black SUV had been trailing us since we left the parking lot. "They're still following," Elena whispered, her voice laced with fear. I exhaled sharply. turning the wheel and taking a sharp right onto a dimly lit road. The SUV hesitated at the turn but followed. They weren't letting us go. I gritted my teeth. Hold on. Slamming my foot on the gas, I pushed the car faster, weaving through side streets. The SUV tried to keep up, but they didn't know these streets like I did. Another turn. Another. Then, nothing. The SUV had vanished from the mirror. We lost them, I muttered, my pulse still racing. But I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. We pulled into a motel parking lot on the outskirts of town. It wasn't luxury, but it was better than nothing. Elena's daughter had fallen asleep in the back seat, exhausted from the chaos of the night. Elena, though, was still wide awake, gripping her arms as she stared out the window. They won't stop looking for us, she whispered. I nodded. That's why we need to stop running. She turned to me, eyes filled with disbelief. Stop running? Do you have any idea who these people are? I know they want to keep you silent, I said. Which means you have something they don't want the world to see. Slowly, I pulled out the notebook. Elena hesitated, then exhaled. This is the proof. The evidence of everything they've done. I flipped through the pages. Transactions. Names. Locations. Enough to bring them down. But we needed a plan. And we needed it fast. I stepped outside, making a call. After 2 rings, a familiar voice answered. I was wondering when you'd reach out. Lucas Rains. Former journalist turned investigator. One of the only people I knew who could help. I have something you'll want to see, I said. A pause. Meet me at the old diner. 1 hour. I hung up and turned to Elena. We have someone who can help. She hesitated, then nodded. But something told me this was just the beginning. The diner was empty, save for Lucas sitting in the corner, stirring a cup of coffee. He looked up as we approached. Took you long enough? I slid the notebook across the table. Tell me this is enough. Lucas flipped through the pages. His eyebrows rose. This is more than enough. This could bring them down. Then let's do it, I said. Lucas let out a slow breath. It's not that simple. We need the right timing. If we release this the wrong way, they'll bury it before the public even sees it. I clenched my jaw. Then what do we do? Lucas met my gaze. We make sure everyone sees it at once. Lucas leaned forward, lowering his voice. If we send this to the right media sources, we can make sure it spreads before they can react. Elena was silent, gripping her daughter's hand. And if they find us before that? I glanced at her. Then we make sure they don't. Lucas nodded. We do this right, and they'll never be able to silence you again. Elena swallowed hard. Then, slowly, she nodded. It was time to end this. As we left the diner, I felt it, the weight of eyes watching us. I turned slightly, catching a glimpse of a black car parked across the street. They had found us. Elena, get in the car, I muttered. She obeyed without hesitation, pulling her daughter in. I walked slowly, keeping my movements casual. Then, the black car's engine roared to life. They were coming, and I had no intention of making it easy for them. The moment I hit the gas, the car behind us did the same. Elena clutched the seat, fear in her eyes. They're not stopping. I know, I muttered. The streets blurred past us. I took turns without slowing, keeping just ahead. But they were relentless. I needed an escape. Then, an idea. I took a sharp left onto an unfinished road leading to an old bridge. No streetlights. No cameras. Just darkness. I turned off the headlights and vanished into the night. We pulled into a secluded alleyway, hearts still pounding. They'll keep coming, Elena whispered. I nodded. Not if we end this first. Lucas had already sent the files. Now, all we had to do was wait. But something told me Victor wouldn't go down quietly. Morning came with silence. Too much silence. Then, a single message on my phone. It's over when I say it's over. Elena's hands shook as she read the text. They're still coming. I exhaled slowly. Then we make sure they never do again. Morning arrived with an eerie stillness. Elena sat at the edge of the motel bed, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through her phone. The leaked files had already begun circulating. News outlets were picking up the story, reporters were asking questions, and Victor's organization was suddenly under a spotlight they couldn't escape. But that didn't mean he was finished. I checked my phone. One unread message. Unknown number. You think you've won? A cold shiver ran down my spine. I knew men like Victor. He wouldn't go down without trying to drag us down with him. I turned to Elena. They're coming. We need to move. She looked up, fear flickering in her eyes. Where? Somewhere they won't find us. She swallowed hard and nodded. Time was running out. We drove for hours, leaving the city behind. The tension in the car was thick. Elena kept glancing at her daughter, and I kept checking the rearview mirror. We stopped at a small cabin deep in the woods. It belonged to an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, but knew I could still trust. Lucas was already waiting when we arrived. This won't hold them off forever, he warned as I stepped out of the car. It just needs to buy us enough time, I replied. Elena helped her daughter inside while I stood with Lucas, watching the tree lean. We both knew it. Victor wasn't done yet. Lucas pulled out his laptop and checked the news. It's working, he muttered. Victor's name is all over the headlines. Law enforcement is involved now. It's only a matter of time before they move in. I nodded, but I didn't relax. Victor wouldn't sit back and wait for the walls to close in. He'd come for us first. I turned to Lucas. If he does, we need to be ready. Lucas exhaled. I hope you know what you're doing. So did I. It happened just after midnight. A car approached, slow, deliberate. I watched from the window, heart pounding. Then, the headlights cut out. Silence. I reached for my phone and sent a single text to Lucas. They're here. The knock on the door was soft. Too soft. I glanced at Elena. Stay with your daughter. She nodded, pulling the little girl close. I opened the door, and there he was, Victor Ruiz, dressed in an expensive suit, his expression unreadable. You've made quite the mess, he murmured. I folded my arms. You're finished? Victor chuckled. You really believe that? Then he took a step forward, and I knew. This wasn't over yet. Victor exhaled slowly. You could have walked away. You could have ignored them, let them disappear. But instead, you put yourself in the middle of this. I didn't flinch, because I don't stand by while people like you destroy lives. His smirk faded. Do you really think the truth matters? I held my ground. It does now. A slow, tense moment passed. Then, the sound of sirens. Victor's jaw tightened. I tilted my head. Looks like your time's up. The police cars pulled up, their lights flashing against the trees. Officers stepped out, surrounding the cabin. Victor's men hesitated, glancing at him. He let out a slow sigh. You really think this changes anything? I met his gaze. I know it does. The officers moved in. Victor didn't resist. He knew he couldn't. This game was over. The sun was rising when it was all over. Victor and his men were taken into custody. The evidence had done its job. Lucas sat on the porch, rubbing his temples. I can't believe that actually worked. Elena stepped outside, her daughter holding onto her hand. She looked at me. Her eyes were filled with something I hadn't seen before. Hope. Elena and her daughter had a future now. A real one. She turned to me, a soft smile on her lips. I don't know how to thank you. I shook my head. You don't have to. For the first time in years, I felt like I had done something that truly mattered. And that was enough. Lucas leaned against the car, watching as Elena and her daughter packed their things. She's going to be okay, he murmured. I nodded. Yeah. He glanced at me. And what about you? I smirked. I think I'll be just fine. Elena hugged her daughter, then turned to me. Will I see you again? She asked softly. I hesitated, then nodded. Maybe. She smiled, then got into the car. As I watched them drive away, a strange feeling settled in my chest. Peace. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was finally living.